God, he's going to go around the inside. He's going to send it. He's taking the lead of the Canadian Grand Prix on the last lap. Matt Turner takes the win in a remarkable race. We have teammates coming together. How devastating!
And hello everybody, welcome in to the iFormula League Formula 3 Round 5 here from the Hungarian circuit. And I am joined here today with Carlos Kitao, my co-commentator for the evening. And it's looking like this round here is going to be yet another stacked field for the Formula 3 cars.
Yeah, I think so. With these drivers, the way we've seen them the past few weeks, I mean, there's a few still missing. We just hope they're gonna join meanwhile. But still, it's a pretty big field comparing or taking into account there's just been an F1 race. So I wasn't expecting a lot of people to just come in like this. So it's gonna be a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's talk about the F3 championship as it stands so far. I mean, we take a look at the top of the field and it looks as though that DriveX team, I mean, they have something that seems like a lot of the other guys don't have at the moment. It's just that out-and-out raw pace from both Victor Barris and Antonio Jimenez as well. You know, both of them currently first and second in the championships, third being Frederick Larson as well. So, you know, Frederick did a great job yesterday in the F2. So he's obviously going to be trying to look for maybe something a bit more today in that F3, in the F3 car. Obviously a little bit slower than the F2 car, and as far as I'm aware, the DRS also doesn't work quite the same as well.
Yeah, in the F3, there's actually no movable arrow, and yeah, in the F2 you have that, but still, you know, with the increased speed. The racing, it just gives you that little bit less time to react to stuff, and I've actually heard from Fred Larson that he prefers the racing in the F3 because of that, because it's just slower, and you know, he actually said the slower the car, the better the racing. So let's see what he can do today as compared to yesterday.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, I think that's what we see from a lot of these slower classes as well, isn't it? It's as the cars seem to get a little bit slower, the racing seems to get quite a bit closer, and you know, you can see it in real life as well. For example, when you're looking at the likes of, say, GT4 and sort of that club class compared to the higher tiers of the, you know, the Formula 2, the Formula 1 classes, for example, it seems as though once you start relying more on that downforce, it really affects the ability to follow close and really get in behind these drivers.
Yep. That's exactly it. And actually, just on a note here, the F3, the tire compound, has been updated recently, and I actually managed to get some opinions from the F3 drivers, and they're saying the tires heat up a bit faster after the update, and other than that, the tire feels pretty much the same. I've heard some drivers as well. They say there's the fall off of the tires occurs a bit differently, but that's mostly it. So there's a bit of a difference on the tires, but yeah, that's it basically.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that is something that I think a lot of people are going to be putting into consideration is the fact that obviously with the new tire compounds, you know, the tire may behave slightly differently, have a different sort of limit of grip as well. So potentially they're finding either that the car, as you say, does have more pace, and so you can push the car harder. But it'll be interesting to see how the strategies play out as well, with sort of pit stops becoming a thing as well, and you know, we may see the tire wear potentially being increased, or maybe even decreased for a lot of these drivers. So maybe they will only need sort of that one set of tires and can just fuel up and just go from there, and it would just be an out-and-out sprint for the entirety of it. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, because these drivers also have a mandatory tire change for this car. So let's see what the strategy is, because in the F2, I feel just stopping as early as possible is the way to go in terms of strategy. So obviously you have to keep up with the pace as well, but in identical pace, the ideal strategy is just to pit as early as possible. So let's see what these drivers feel like in the F3.
Yeah, absolutely. But here we are in qualifying then, and 7 minutes of the session been and gone so far. And it looks like at the moment Jake Potts is setting the sort of representative time with a 1:37.1, and that is 1.2 seconds quicker than anyone else so far. So not sure if he's found anything in the car potentially, but that seems to be one hell of a gap, and something that I don't think we've seen to be that much of a thing in the F3 Championship, I guess, apart from when you look at the likes of, say, Victor Barris, for example. It looks like the field seemed to be pretty close week on week, so to have that gap this early in qualifying is a bit of a surprise, I think.
Yeah, and you can see from P2 onwards, it's very close up to P7 at least. So as you see, Jimenez, they're just taking a big chunk out of the time, but it's spots on another car, because I mean, 1 second of gap here is massive, really, for him. So he's gotta be sitting comfortably in that car.
Yeah, and you know, it's one of those things. I think that, you know, with the Dallara F3 car, obviously it is considered to be quite a spec series. You know, there's not much you can really do with the car in comparison to, say, for example, the F2 or the F1. So it seems like the only way to really find time is actually in yourself as a driver, and how you drive the car will definitely affect, you know, how much you can get out of it. And potentially slipstream played a factor. You know, we see quite often that around circuits, you know, slipstream is always a talking point. You know, you see it around the likes of, you know, some of the bigger circuits like Spa, like Silverstone. Everyone will talk about the slipstream, and especially at like Monza, but around Hungaroring, maybe not so much. I mean, aside from that one long start-finish straight, you don't really have many other opportunities to maybe make a pass.
Yeah, I felt that yesterday with I was sitting behind Ivan Bovkamp for what felt like a million laps after the stops. It's just impossible to pass here, even with the DRS on those cars. But you know, this track, basically you can overtake into turn 1, and then if you're feeling gutsy, you can overtake into turn 4 right here, or if another driver makes a mistake. But other than that, you just sit around for a full lap until you then try to get the best exits out of the last corner to make a pass into turn 1. It's just high downforce track, lots of quick corners, so not many braking zones. You know, it's just impossible to overtake here.
Yeah, and I think when we're looking at a circuit like Hungaroring, you know, a lot of people draw similarities to Monaco in terms of like the tightness of it. You know, yes, this is a purpose-built circuit, so it's not a street circuit, but it might as well be one sometimes. You know, when you take a look at like the hairpins and how there's a lot of, you know, that middle sector in general. You know, there's a lot of sweeping corners, as you mentioned, and those sweeping corners then lead right into a section which is just sort of hairpins. So there's not really anywhere to overtake except for maybe Sector 1, and if you're feeling gutsy and you get a run, then maybe you can try going the long way around the outside. But, you know, we always say as commentators, you know, we try and look at all these tracks and, you know, we will always say, hey, you know, this track may be slightly harder to overtake on than another, and, you know, this track's known for its difficult overtaking opportunities, and you've got to be really brave to do it. But then it seems to be the way that these drivers will show us that actually this is sim racing, where we can actually try to make moves anywhere, and we're going to try it.
Yeah, but it doesn't really work like that in Hungary, because, I mean, it really feels like Monaco in terms of overtaking, but it's slightly different. Like in Monaco, the overtaking doesn't happen because it's all very tight. Here, like, it seems like you could overtake, but then you actually go and make a race, and you figure out there's no way you can overtake because the corners are just pressing the gas to go, and there's not many braking zones apart from turn 1, which is where you want to make the overtaking under braking. So I mean, it feels like Monaco, but not in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. But I wanna get an onboard here with Antonio Jimenez and just see sort of, you know, the different lines that people are taking, especially through, for example, turn 2. Obviously, it was an off-camber corner, an off-camber hairpin that seems to have multiple different lines. I think I saw yesterday, you know, Lewis Archer seemed to be taking a very, very late apex, almost hanging the car out on the outside for as long as he could before sweeping back in, and other people taking it as a double apex, and some just sort of trying to hit the inside of the corner as early as possible and stay there to sort of not have to fight against the camber of the road. I'm not sure if you can provide an insight into potentially all the different lines and if there is any that seem actually faster.
Yeah, I did that myself actually. I was struggling, as you might have noticed, with the pace. I don't know what happened there with between practice and the race myself, but so I had to try those different lines in the race, and I actually found like if you take the, let's say, the Louis Archer line like you just described, you get a better exit or a better run through turn 3. It's basically a non-corner at that point because you're coming in from way more towards the left, so that corner is basically a straight. It's just a kink on the straight, but then, as you said, the other line is just going in. Let's see what Jimenez does here, but just going in very early here, kind of like this, but I was taking it even earlier, and you can just hug the inside up in there and still make this corner flat turn 3. So there's really some very interesting lines you can take through here.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing to also note is that with Hungarian being quite a new circuit to iRacing as well, the off-tracks seem to be a little bit more realistic to what you would see in real racing, I think. You know, with a lot of the actual limits being defined ahead of time, and actually, you know, everyone can say that they can clearly see where the limits of the track are because it's listed before you actually get into the session. There's like a little rules tab now, I believe, where it'll actually show you where the edges of the track are defined. And I think that's also going to give us quite a lot of knowledge as well as to potentially just how much you can really push the corners, because obviously as a racing driver, you know, you're trying to make as much time as you can, right? That's your job as a driver, is to find every single millisecond that you can. So you want to try and be using as much of the track as possible. And I guess you then take a look at, you know, you want to try and cut corners as much as you can without obviously being out of track limits and having your lap invalidated, and especially in qualifying. But then you also want to try and run wide as much as possible as well to, you know, get as best of a run as you can and really use the momentum of the car, especially in lower downforce ones. I've noticed is that momentum is a huge factor and really will help you find that sort of really good, nice balance between getting really fast into the corner, but then also really fast on exit as well.
Yeah, you know, especially not just the low downforce cars, but the low power cars. That's what matters the most, that you keep up the momentum. But it's just a general racing rule that if you keep the momentum, you're gonna be quicker. High downforce, low downforce, high power, low power, it's always gonna be quicker generally. You know, in a rally, for example, it's a bit different. You can go sideways, and that's the quicker way to go around. But in general, road racing, like we see here in this open wheel series, keeping the momentum is always beneficial. Even in the F1, it's just less noticeable because it's way more power. It's like 1,000 horsepower, I think, in those cars. So the F3 is probably, what, 200 maybe? So, you know, keeping the momentum is always the rule to go.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, obviously that power difference, you know, we can see it even in between F2 and F3. You know, F2 has, as you mentioned, probably about 200, maybe 250, depending on sort of the configuration that they were running. And then, you know, you look at F2 and that has closer to like 400 maybe. almost pushing 500, and then you get to the upper echelons of F1 where all of a sudden you've got 1,000 horsepower underneath your right foot, and if you're not careful, you know, these cars don't have TC, they don't have ABS, so you may end up, as we see for example here, Joe Watts, you know, maybe locking up the brakes and going straight, and or spinning the car under power as well is obviously something that's a concern. And I think with F3, obviously you still have to be aware of it, but I think it allows the drivers to be a bit more aggressive, and that also leads then into some better racing as well, because we can see, you know, moves that potentially you would try in a bigger car, and you know, you may not be able to quite have the agility that it seems like these lower sort of lighter cars have.
Yeah, for sure. You can definitely use different lines for depending on the car. And I haven't driven the Mercedes for a while, but that car just feels like it's on rails for sure. So, I mean, it's definitely not the same in these F3 cars.
No,
you need to really be smart about it, and there's different ways you can make the moves.
Yeah, and as you said, the Mercedes feels like it is on rails, and honestly, from a lot of the drivers, it seems like that seems to be quite a common theme, is that, you know, yes, you look at these sort of lower power cars who don't have as big of a tire, you know, you don't have that same contact patch on the road, so you know, you end up with an F3 car that doesn't have much power, but also doesn't have the greatest tires and not great aero, and it seems like everything's sort of playing against it on trying to stick to the road as much as it can. But then you look at the F1 car that has these big chunky tires, and you know, all these different soft compounds of tire, and all of this clever sort of aerodynamic stuff that's going on, and all of the clever little like suspension bits that they do as well, and all of a sudden you end up finding a car that, yeah, if you drive it in a hot lap scenario, sticks to the road like glue, but if you end up getting into a situation where you may have some dirty air from the car in front, or, you know, just in general the air is disturbed for whatever reason, all of a sudden all that lovely grip that you had from the aero is gone. And I feel like it's something that you don't necessarily notice in these F3 cars as much. Obviously, I think it's a factor in any car. You know, the dirty air is definitely something that you don't want to have. But I think it is more noticeable, as you say, the further up we go through sort of the different tiers of car.
Yeah, for sure. You know, the F1 has got it is built around the downforce, so if you're missing that, you're missing a big chunk of the performance on the car. So yeah, but coming back to the tires, as you say, these tires are much thinner. They're also different tires, and my dog is agreeing with me. I don't know if you could hear that, but yeah, you know, it's just different compound tires. These cars are like 10 years old. The Mercedes is from last year, and the Renault is from 2000. The F2, the Renault 3.5, is from 2017, I think. So you know, the tires also work much differently. They're all different brands, and in the F1 you even have different tire compounds. So coming into strategy here, it's not much you can play with here on the F3 and the F2. But in the F1, yeah, for sure you can have a lot of different interesting strategies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, 5 minutes left of the session, and I mean, it's looking like at the moment Jimenez and Potts are going to seem to be taking 1 and 2, and then it's quite a considerable gap to Julie Redmond there in third, and then it seems to get closer the further down the field you go. But it seems to be quite a common theme in the F3, is to have these drivers that are, you know, you'll find little packs of people who tend to just stick together and have racing amongst themselves, and then there'll be a little bit of a gap before you find the next pack. But yeah, I mean, it's looking like that midfield battle between, you know, third all the way maybe down to 11th is definitely going to be a close one that we'll be keeping an eye on.
Yeah, there's like, I can see 3 different chunks of battles, let's say here, you know, P1 and P2, and then you have P3 up to P11 like you mentioned, and then you have another close group of cars from P12 to P15, and then, you know, it just keeps going like that, or maybe to P18 even, and then you have, you know, the slower guys maybe still getting used to the car, they didn't have much time to practice, something like that. But they're all close together. There's not big gaps between each driver. They're in chunks basically, which is always good to see. But as a commentator, it's very hard to keep up with because there's different battles. Almost feels like different races even sometimes. But you were saying Jimenez was battling with Potts here for pole. Yeah, Potts just took the position from Jimenez. Obviously, Jimenez missing his teammate apparently, Victor Barris. You know, Barris is just saying, okay, I got the championship under control. You guys battle it out. I'm gonna take a few weeks off, and then I'll come back next week. But yeah, seems I'm hoping Jimenez will come back at Potts here in the dying minutes of the session.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think you know, as you mentioned with Victor Barris seeming to be not here today, obviously, no matter what the issue may be, you know, we hope that it's not too bad and he comes back next week and comes back fighting. But you know, it may mean that we may see a couple of other drivers here get to put their name in the spotlight, and drivers that we may not even, you know, we may not have seen before pop up and really show what they can do. Obviously, you know, it's like in a lot of series, you know, there's that one driver or a couple of drivers that everybody knows who are always fighting for the top, and if one of them doesn't get to make the race for whatever reason, you then look at, you know, a couple of other drivers further up the road who, you know, may not have been fighting in the same way, you know, may have always been just that couple of seconds behind, who can now actually show what they're capable of. And as I say, I think it's going to make the racing a lot closer going forward.
Yeah, but there's also, even if Barris is missing, there's some drivers I'm keeping my eye on. Obviously, we've talked about Frederick Larson. I don't see Danny O'Keefe here. Maybe I'm missing, but I don't think he's present today. I don't think he's here. And then we have some people that usually qualify very towards the back of the grid, and you look at them 5 laps after the race started and they've picked up 10 positions. I think it's the case of Dominic Herbert, who's P9 right now. So that's looking like a podium for him after 5 laps, if he follows the trend that he keeps having. There's some drivers like that. Obviously, you have Eli Cannon here, having a very good qualifying compared to what he usually has. And there's a few battles going on here. Obviously, I don't know all the drivers. It's a huge field. Feels like 200 drivers here every race, so it's hard to keep up with all of them.
Yeah, exactly. We currently have, I believe, 24 drivers that are setting a lap time, but I think 25 drivers actually on the grid. And we will see that hopefully later on through the session. But yeah, I mean, it's a big grid in comparison to what we normally have. I mean, you look at the F2, and yeah, we've had, you know, the start of the season, we've had 20-ish cars, and then, you know, F1 again, same sort of thing, where, you know, we had quite a few cars early on, and then it seems to be as the racing has gone on, that has dropped off a little bit. And you know, it is a bit of a shame to see, but you know, we've got this massive F3 grid to make up for it, and you know, at the end of this season, obviously there is that promotion and demotion system that happens in this league, where, you know, we may see a couple of drivers go up into F2 and then maybe bring a couple of other drivers with them potentially, and as such, you know, we will get a whole new scope of talent, I think, going into sort of the next seasons going forward.
Oh yeah, for sure. There's some drivers here who I expect to see in F1 2 seasons from now. And you can see just by this leaderboard at the end of the session, you know, Potts, Jimenez, Victor Barris is actually missing, Redmond, Julie Redmond, Frederick Larson, James Muller, and, you know, Rakauskas and Janusz Kauskas, and actually, yeah, Janusz Kauskas is missing as well. You know, everyone in the top 10, actually, now that I think about it. They'll make it to F2, and yeah, you know, eventually a lot of them will also show up in F1, I hope.
Yeah, and you know, it's one of those things, I think, that as this league develops, obviously we're going to be looking for more and more drivers to really be stepping up and pushing to drive for that next tier and that next league to maybe make this place just an even better place to race than it already is, you know. And as always, we you know, as commentators, we just want to see close racing at the end of the day, right? Like that's our thing. That's what we want to see. We want to commentate on some of the closest battles that you can get here in single-seater racing, and I think the F3 is obviously a great place to start, but I think it would be silly for me to say that a lot of these drivers want to stay here, right? Like, I think a few drivers might want to stay in the F3, like the car, but ultimately I think most people's goals is to get into the F1 at the end of it.
Yeah, some people don't seem to like the F1 that much, so they prefer to stick around in the F2. I'm one of them, actually. I think I prefer the F2 over the F1. And actually, something more important than that, Victor Barris just came into the session at the end of qualifying, so he's not going to be setting a lap time. Maybe he got mixed up with the daylight savings time. As you know, he's from Spain, and that's in Europe. They only change 2 weeks from now, or 1 week from now, actually. So maybe he got mixed up. He thought practice was going to start later than it did. So he's going to be starting at the back, I think.
Which I mean, he will be starting in P26, and that's going to be one to definitely keep our eyes on, as, you know, we know Victor Barris is quick. So it's going to be interesting to see how he can fight his way through the field, and I think in terms of a, you know, highest climber award, as it were, I think he's definitely going to be one that we're going to have to keep our eye on, definitely.
We said Hungary is hard to overtake. We'll see just how hard it is to overtake here with Barris. Hoping to, you know, make it at least to the podium. It's going to be a tough one, but it's surely going to be an interesting one. Let's see what it does.
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, there will be a little bit of a warm-up session just to, you know, make sure everyone gets a chance to change their setup, you know, get back onto that race setup from their quali setup, and then just maybe do a couple of installation laps to really just sort of nail in exactly what you want to do, and maybe do a couple of practice starts as well, as we know, because it's all manual starts as well here. So you know, I think as a driver you want to, obviously your goal is to get as best of a start as possible, but I think it almost goes a little bit unpracticed, I think, the race starts, as you know, so many people are used to now rolling starts being sort of the main thing that we see throughout the course of various different other forms of motorsport. But single seat is obviously still using that traditional standing start style, where you need to really control the revs off the line and make sure that you don't spin those tires too much, because if you do, you may end up finding that cars, you know, 5 rows back are even going to be fighting you into the first corner.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think adding to the starts, or the standing starts, also pit entry and pit exit, especially pit entry, that's something that goes unpracticed most of the time. There's obviously an optimal braking point to be at the speed limit right on the line, and I think most people don't actually practice that. They turn laps on their practice sessions, and if they spin or make a mistake or their lap is done, they just tow back to the pits. Instead of actually practicing entering the pits. And some drivers may be losing time on that, because, you know, they don't want to get the penalty, so they brake early to make sure they're at the speed limit once they join, once they're over the line. But obviously that's losing time, and hopefully no time lost on a speeding penalty, because that's even worse.
Yeah, and obviously iRacing does quite a lot of that automatically, but there is also stewards around just in case we do need to throw things like safety cars as well, which can always play a factor. As we've seen in the F2, quite a few races, actually, the safety car definitely playing a factor in some of the races and affecting the results, probably a little bit unjustly sometimes, but something we're always working on to make sure that everyone is happy with what's going on within the league. So yeah, it's always nice to see. But let's just talk about the qualifying results just while we've got a couple minutes before we get to gridding, just so people know the order. Obviously it's been up on your screen for a little while now, but Jake Potts obviously taking pole position with that 1:36.934, only driver to break that 37-second barrier. So looks as though everyone else didn't really wasn't able to find that pace that Jake managed to find, which is, you know, definitely impressive from him, especially considering the person that he was setting the pace against, Antonio Jimenez, you know, was only a 10th off. So look for those two to maybe try and make a couple of runs early on in the session and really start to try and push as much as they can off the start. You know, you're going to think Antonio is probably going to look to the inside, obviously having to start on that inside line, but then maybe Jake Potts comes back on the inside of the next corner because, you know, that's where the natural way of the track will go. You know, first corner, right-hander, you start on the left side of the grid, that means you're going to be on the outside, but second corner, and arguably more important to get right, is a left-hander, so you're going to be on the inside coming out of turn 1 and going into turn number 2.
Yeah, going around the outside into turn 1, I think is actually the preferred line, if you can stick around the outside, because it's actually hard to get an off track there on the exit. You can take a lot of the curb, you can go a lot into the Astro, and then you get the inside into turn 2, which is actually preferable. So, but then the other guy can stick around the outside of 2 and get the inside for turn 3. So, you know, it's fun to race here. As hard as it is to overtake, it's fun to race here.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's always going to be playing in your mind is where do I position my car to get the best possible run on the person in front of me, right? So, you know, you look at quite a lot of these drivers and thinking that maybe we can, you know, see sort of different philosophies on how to overtake. But just running through a bit of the rest of the grid as well, just before we get on into the race. Julie Redman there in third with Frederick Larson. Setting almost identical times, by the way, with only being 0.001 of a second off, which is pretty impressive. You know, it wasn't much more that Frederick Larson needed to find to overtake, but just couldn't quite do it. And then James Miller there rounding up the top 5. Again, really close between those three drivers. You know, third, fourth, fifth, all separated by 0.02 of a second. I mean, that's nothing in the grand scheme of things.
Oh yeah, for sure. You know, F3 has always been known by, you know, these close gaps. So let's see as the drivers are griding up actually. So I'll send my word over to you to commentate this awesome start.
Well, as we will see, all of the drivers are going to line themselves up on the grid. We still have a little bit of time left before we will see those lights go on, and I will say it does look like it is a very long way back here from the start all the way to the back of that grid. As we mentioned before, 26 drivers in total, and here we are with the lights. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 red lights, and out they go, and here we are, green flag for the Hungarian Grand Prix. Let's see if anybody bogs on the line. It looks like a few people were off there in the background, as we will cut back to the leaders and see if everyone has got a nice and okay start. It looks going into turn 1 that everyone seems to be doing pretty well, no one having any sort of really bad issues, but it seems like there was a spinner there in the middle of all of that, and that is Darius there, the number 23 car, having a bit of an issue and having to let quite a few people through. It seems like a couple of other people also having issues trying to make it through turn 1 in one piece with so many cars all everywhere on the circuit, it seems. And it looks like Julie Redman's lost a couple of positions, but a couple of other people gaining off of a couple of other mistakes. We'll see Frank Settle gaining 10 positions, Jackson Carr taking up the 7 off the start, so great start from them, only a couple of positions ahead. And then it seems as though we do have a safety car though, so hopefully that will neutralize things a little bit, but already action off the word go.
Yeah, that's, you know, we were expecting this, and actually Frank Settle got a lot of positions, but his car is totally ruined. I think he's just gonna pull off, and yeah, he's just towed back to the pits. His car was ruined, so yeah, too bad for him on that start, really.
Yeah, and yeah, I think, you know, when we take a look back at what happened there, I want to try and see if we can see what actually caused the yellow flag. So here we are on board with Dominic Herbert, and let's see what happened here. And it looks as though, oh, he just didn't get on the brakes quite enough and ended up hitting into the back end of I think that was Darius there in front of him, and then pulling off to the side of the circuit and trying to maybe let him back through. So that may have been why we had a safety car. Obviously, with a car stopped in the middle of the track, you kind of expecting that, I think.
Yeah, but then actually Frank Settle actually ran into the back of Brandon Walker into turn 2. Actually, it was a whole separate incident. So yeah, I don't know what happened there. Brandon Walker was just slow in the off camber, and Frank Settle just ran into the back of him. That's how he picked up that damage.
Well, let's see if we can get an onboard here with Brandon Walker as he's coming through. Looks as though he is lifting off already. And then, yeah, you'll see Frank go plowing into the back end of him, and looks as though he slowed as if almost the yellow flags came out before then and was slowing down almost preemptively for a safety car, but maybe that caught Frank off guard a bit, and meant that he couldn't quite couldn't quite see why they were going so slowly, which does mean that we will have the race neutralized, and it will be a single file restart here, which will mean maybe a bit less chaos going into turn 1 this time.
Let's hope so, with some drivers already off of the race. There's gonna be some less chaos to go on, but you know, they're bunched up as they were on the start, so, and still a lot of drivers, even though some of them are out, so yeah, let's just hope for the best here. But yeah, you know, as a consequence of that, some drivers picked up on a few positions. You know, Fred Larson is now up into the podium from P4. James Muller picked up 1 position, and Julie Redmond lost those 2 positions. So yeah, someone's gain is another one's loss. And then you have some big climbers here, like Jackson Carr actually was able to stick around in P9 from P16, and Vitautas from P12 to P8 now. So let's see if they can actually gain some more positions.
Yeah, and it does look like we will have 3 cars out of the race. That would be Stuart Gibbons, John Rowland, and Frank Settle are all out of the race after the incident in turn 1, and then later on in turn 2 as well, I imagine. And then, yeah, there's a couple of other drivers who have lost positions. Obviously, Brandon Walker losing 14 and Dominic Herbert also losing 12. So, yeah, quite a few drivers losing, but the likes of Steve Bunting gaining 10 positions, Vincent Saint gaining 9, and Nicholas Marshall also gaining 9 positions. So, as you mentioned, another driver's loss is another one's gain, and it looks as though that's going to be the case. And I will say, if the racing is going to be like this, it's going to be quite difficult to keep an eye on everything going forward here.
Yeah, you know, these F3 races are always like this. If you think the F2 is packed with action, then, you know, buckle up for this one, because it's even more than that. You know, we've talked about it multiple times in the qualifying session. It's much closer racing, and especially on this track, you know, everybody seems to bunch up a bit more.
Yeah, and it does look like the lights on the safety car are going out, so I'd imagine we will be going green this time by. So we'll have another lap of pacing, and then Jake Potts will lead us away going on into the final corner. So look to see when he gets away. Obviously, if he can get away cleanly, then he may actually be untroubled into turn 1, which will be quite nice. But looking at a couple of drivers, it seems like Frank Settle has got himself back out there as well, back out onto track, with Stuart Gibbons also being back out there on track as well. So looks like those drivers have actually got themselves back out. Admittedly, they will be a lap down, maybe even 2 laps down now. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they can claw back anything off of the start here, and we'll be following them, I'm sure, as they'll try to make their way further up the field later on through the later quarter of this race. Obviously, 35 laps here. You'd imagine that it would be around about an hour in length if you were to put a time on it. So, you know, with the safety car, maybe extending that a little bit and causing maybe a couple of plans to go astray a little bit, especially as we mentioned, mandatory pit stops. So, you know, potentially we may see some people pit under safety car, but obviously you can only do it when the pit lane is open, which I think will be now. So I wouldn't imagine anyone's going to pit this lap, considering the safety car is going green this time by. But even still, we're gonna look and see what happens, and see if there's any interesting strategies that develop.
Yeah, obviously, yeah, the time to pit has gone by. I don't know why iRacing does that, but I think the safety car follows NASCAR rules. That's why the pit lane is always closed. If it was open from the start, everybody, like, you know, there was going to be a few different pit strategies. I actually don't know if these tires will make the whole race. Yeah, I'm expecting some drivers to pit early because that seems to be the strategy to go, at least in F2. So I don't see why it would be any different in this series.
Yeah, and I think especially if you can find that little bit of pocket of air as well when you come into pits, as we will hold that thought for a second, as Jake Potts will come around the second to the last corner, has to wait for that safety car to get back into the pit lane before he can go, but once that safety car crosses that line, he can go whenever he feels like. And I imagine he's going to try and back everyone up a little bit here before he does indeed go full throttle out of the corner. And here we are, back to green flag racing. Let's see if anyone can get a jump on anyone else going into turn one. Antonio Jimenez not quite close enough, but Frederick Larson maybe looking to the inside, as it looks like he will try to attempt the move, but nothing doing just there. As it looks as though Julie Redmond did almost get overtaken there. In fact, I think James Miller managed to get past, as we will see now a three-way battle here between Julie Redmond, Joe Watts, and I'm not sure who that other CUDA driver is, the number 47 there. I think that may be a lapped car, yeah, of Stuart Gibbons, who got himself involved a little bit early on in the safety car order. So potentially the safety car went green and he was still being overtaken. And what that's going to mean is that there's going to be a lot of traffic all trying to get past him, and he's going to have to try and yield as much as he can, and in a lot of these corners, especially going into this chicane here, it's going to be quite difficult for him, and for a lot of these other drivers. Obviously everyone's going to be really close, so as a back marker, I'm sure that you're trying to think, just get off the racing line and really slow down and try and let as many people through as early as possible as you can, so I can get back racing again.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I wouldn't be in his position. I wouldn't want to be in his position right now, especially on this track. Let's just hope he doesn't stop in the middle of the racing line like we've seen before, and hopefully he can let those drivers by. But actually, I picked up on an incident there back there with Victor Barris spinning in turn 4. So any work he had done to pick up some positions is now lost, and he needs to get back on it as soon as possible. No damage, fortunately for him, but yeah, still lost some time.
Yeah, and it looks like also Joel Abney has also had an issue, but let's keep on board here with Antonio Jimenez as he goes to try and go up the inside into turn number 1 and makes that move look pretty easy there on Frederick Larson. I mean, he definitely had the overspeed going down the start-finish straight, and he looks like he was able to really keep a hold of it for now, but Frederick Larson looking to try and maybe get back on the inside, which will make Antonio Jimenez maybe think that he wasn't going to be there, and as such, that means he did have a little bit of a lock-up mid-corner, and now he's going to be slow going down this straight, and as you can see, there seems to be 3 or 4 cars, and there was a little bit of contact there as well between Frederick Larson, who's now off on the side of the track, and that's going to allow James Miller to get past, and maybe Julie Redmond around the outside of the corner going into the chicane, and if they're not careful, Joe Watts is going to get involved as well, and Joe Watts goes up the inside of Julie Redmond into the chicane, and that is a brave move.
Yeah, big jump there for Frederick Larson. I don't know if he has any damage, it doesn't look like it, but I saw him make a big jump on contact with Jimenez there, so hopefully he doesn't have any hindering damage there, because he certainly wants to get back into that podium position.
Yeah, and it looks as though, I was just looking at the end plates of his car just to see if there was any damage, and it looks like some of them were maybe bent a little bit, but obviously we don't know how that will correspond to how the car will feel, you know, with iRacing's damage model maybe not being the greatest, but yeah. Regardless, this racing seems to just keep getting closer and closer as Joe Watts is going to try and maybe make a move on Frederick Larson here, going down the straight. Is he going to be able to close enough to send it? And it looks like Frederick is going to try and defend as late as he can on the inside line, and that's going to force Joe Watts to maybe go around the outside. But then the switchback move is coming into effect, which is going to turn into the outside for turn number 2. And if he's able to get around the outside, this could be a huge move and really allow a couple of other drivers to get through as well. And it looks like, again, very, very close driving between these two, really putting faith in the iRacing's new netcode, and has no contact been made so far. So absolutely amazing display for these guys.
Yeah, Frederick Larson just losing another position. I was hoping him to be up there, but he probably just got unfocused now with that incident there with Jimenez. Let's hope actually the damage is not showing up on his wheel. Basically, he's not feeling that damage on his car, because otherwise I don't see why he would lose positions. He's obviously usually a very good driver, doesn't let himself get too distracted. Let's hope everything is okay for him and he can get back up on pace.
Yeah, absolutely. And as much as I want to stick around for this battle, there's battles everywhere on track right now. As further behind this pack, we've got another pack all trying to go side by side with each other, as Emmanuel is also trying to battle here with Vincent Saint, and a battle that I'm going to watch quite closely because I want to see whether or not this slipstream can really make a difference here in these cars. You know, you look at maybe being a half-second gap being close enough, and you know, he's looking to try and get within that, but going on board here with Flodman and seeing whether or not he can get up the inside with this Team Banana car number currently sat in 9th, and he's going to try and look towards the inside here of the number 97. Does manage to make the move, and if the 97 isn't careful, he's going to have Eli coming back on him as well. But I believe Jackson Carr and Eli Cannon are both teammates, so potentially there could be a strategy being played here where Jackson maybe lets Eli through to attack Flodman if he doesn't feel as comfortable in that car.
Yeah, obviously these drivers want to avoid losing time to each other because there's bigger fights ahead. If they were fighting for the win, you know, maybe they would say, oh, my dog is just going crazy, so I'll hand over to you. Give me a few seconds.
Yeah, no worries. But going back on board with these battles, as we will be going into the chicane, and again, the team battle seems to look pretty close, and if Emmanuel isn't careful, we're going to have Darius on the back of that number 7 car, and potentially we may see that number 23 look to maybe make an opportunistic move, maybe through one of the hairpins here, as we will go through the little bit of the sweeper sections just to see if he can keep close enough. And if he can, he's going to look directly onto that inside, and is he going to try and send the move up the inside? Yes, he does. Is he going to be able to hold it there as the number 7 holds it around the outside? And who was that off on this side of the circuit? I want to say that was potentially Brandon Walker off on the side of the circuit, as the number 7 car did manage to hold off the position from Darius, and it looks like Eli Cannon also had a bit of a mistake there as well and is pushed further down the order. So there seems to be action absolutely everywhere on track now, with multiple drivers all having incidents all by themselves on various parts of the circuit, as the number 23 is going to go up the inside once again. Darius looking up the inside of Emmanuel, and hopefully that is all that she wrote and he doesn't have to worry about Emmanuel come back on the inside of turn number 2. Looks like Emmanuel's a little bit too far back, so as far as Darius is concerned, move is made, and he can start looking onto now the back of Jackson Carr.
Yeah, Eli Cannon just seems to have, I mean, there's too many incidents to pick up on, but Eli Cannon just seems to have spun on himself. He was just too happy on the throttle there on the second to last corner. And I think Vincent Saint also spun on the previous corner. So a lot of incidents at the same time on different occasions here.
Yeah, absolutely, and you're starting to wonder if maybe somebody dropped a bit of oil out there on track as well, but
it seems like
as you know, there's battles absolutely everywhere. I think Victor Barris is currently putting the driver ahead of him, Patrick Olsen, under pressure as well, and hopefully we can see maybe Victor start making his way back up, as we know Victor is very quick, and currently he has made up 13 positions. So if people say you can't overtake around this circuit, watch this man as he is going to definitely try and show that he can absolutely do such. You know, he's going to try and make every opportunity he can, and that seems to be a big crash ahead. I think that was Joseph Corley causing that issue, so Victor Barris is going to gain a couple of other positions as well, and go further up into, I believe now, P12. Maybe even ahead of P11, although it looks like Emmanuel is still going strong ahead of him. So we may have to come back to that incident in a second and see what went on there to give Victor Barris another position.
Yeah, I mean, Victor has been on a mission these last few laps. Obviously, these incidents helped, but he's got the pace just to be on Gerbino's gearbox in a lap or two, hunting him down.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we jump back on board here with Julie Redman and James Miller, as this seems to be a battle that keeps developing between the Lumos and Cuda guys. We know they say a lot to each other in the IFL. They definitely have a little bit of team rivalry, and it's always cool to see the two of them trying to battle out on track, both Lumos and Cuda, wanting to prove that they are one of the better teams in the league. And in this F3 championship, I mean, we may look at the Drive X guys obviously being some of the top, but Lumos and Cuda definitely have a point to prove, and you know, the likes of James Miller going up against Julie Redman, and then also Jake Potts there currently in the lead as well, and you're looking at that fight, and it looks as though Jimenez is starting to find a bit of pace, but maybe it's a bit too late already, as it seems to be a 4-second gap between Potts and Jimenez, and then a further 7 seconds back down to Joe Watts. So it looks as though those two at the front seem to have pretty similar pace, and they're just going to run away, and then it'll be this battle here between Watts, Larson, Redmond, Miller. Everyone seems to be just getting involved, and then further down the field we've got Flubman battling with Darius, and then Jackson Carr battling as well, all against each other everywhere on track.
Yeah, and I'm just watching Flobman or Jackson Carr actually trying to make a move on Darius Rukowskis here for that 9th position. Obviously, it's double the points if you wanna from P10 to P9, and these teams are sometimes scrapping for that last position because a point or two can make a difference at the end of the season. So as we see someone go wide there, I don't know if that's a blue flag, but Jackson Carr here trying to make up a few positions to get some points.
Yeah, it looks as though that could have either been John Rowland or Sean Roberts. We'll wait to see. And I think Jackson Carr just getting past the number 13 of Sean Roberts. So that'll be one of the blue flag guys just getting out of the way, keeping the battles as close as possible, trying not to affect them too much. But going back on board here with Victor Barris, as he's now caught up to the back of Emmanuel already. And there looks to be contact between the two of them, and that is definitely not what he wanted. Maybe Victor not quite aware of just quite how close he was into the braking zone, and then also reversing there into the pit wall as well. Sorry, into the barrier there as well. So may have a little bit of rear end damage as well that he didn't really need, and that may force him into an early pit stop. We'll keep on board with him and see if he is going in, and that is indeed what he's doing. So potentially either picked up a meatball or enough damage to justify, hey, I've got to come in right now and serve my pit stop, and then maybe after that I can get back out there and really start battling again.
Yeah, I don't see much damage on his car. I don't know how. It seems impossible that it didn't get any damage, but he probably did get some meatball. Yeah, it just fixed a little bit on his rear wing, so that's the correct decision for him to come in.
Yeah, and meanwhile, we will get back to this battle between James Miller and Julie Redman, who seem to really not want each other to get out of each other's sights. And I'm sure Julie Redman, as much as you know, they want to keep the battle as close as possible, they also are trying to run away from James and catch up to the back of Frederick Larson. And obviously, being within that 1 second window will mean Julie will have that slipstream. We typically say about 1 second is really when you'll start to notice the benefit of drafting the car in in front, obviously, to get rid of some of that air and make it easier to push your car through it. And in these lower power cars, you may even find that those slipstreams actually make a bit more of a difference than you'd expect from a lot of other series, as you know, they don't have, as we mentioned, the DRS assists, so they kind of have to just do it all by themselves and really make the moves as drivers rather than with aids, which is something that we always look at as commentators, and really shows a point, I think, as it looks like James Miller is going to try and make it up the inside. Julie Redmond's going to hang around the outside, and it looks as though Julie made that quite easy around the outside, but it looks as though they're still side by side, so that Julie Redmond car is going to try and keep it as close as possible, even trying to, it looks as though trying to go to the middle of the circuit and force James Miller a bit further out to the outside and side by side through the kink. And we say it's a bit of a nothing corner when you're by yourself, but you add an extra car into the mix and that corner all of a sudden becomes a heck of a lot harder.
Yeah, that was a big, so close between these drivers here. Almost, I was actually expecting to see that Kuda car go around with how close they were from that camera angle. Luckily, Redmond made the move stick, so let's see if she can make it up to the podium positions.
Yeah,
it's certainly
absolutely.
within reach.
Yeah, and you know, you take a look at the fact that Frederick Larson is now within a second, I believe, of Joe Watts, and Joe Watts is where that final podium position is, and I think maybe saying these drivers are going to be out of reaching P1 and 2 is, you know, is realistic, but we're going to wait to see whether or not they can make even further moves going up the grid, and you know, any time you can get on the podium is a great result, regardless on whether or not you're P1, 2 or 3. Obviously you want to be higher up as you can, but you know, these drivers know, you know, Antonio Jimenez and Jake Potts are setting a pace that no other driver seems to be able to get close to right now. You know, 1:37.2 from Antonio Jimenez that last lap, and the fastest we've seen from anyone else has been a 1:38.6, so it seems like those two are almost on another level compared to everyone else so far.
Yeah, for sure. I wouldn't say it's impossible, but I'm not expecting Potts and Jimenez to lose those positions to anyone else, unless there's like a big crash or something, or another safety car even thrown into the mix that can shake things up. But you know, 12-second gap to P3 now. I don't even think they're gonna be battling each other really, because those 3 seconds between them, Jake Potts seemed to be managing those quite well. So maybe he's not even pushing to the limit, as I'm actually on board with Jimenez right here. And he's a bit squirrely through some of these corners, so I think he's actually on the limit of his car really, and Jake Potts seemed to be handling it quite well.
Yeah, and you know, it is something that we do mention, is that if you can run that very, very quick pace, but you can do it in a very safe way, it means that you do have a little bit of an advantage over everyone else, is knowing that if someone else is pushing your lap times, and you can be like, well, I can find another couple of tenths quite easy, so I'm just going to keep doing that every single lap. And just as I say that, Jimenez doing a 1:36.9, and I believe that almost matched the quali time set in qualifying by Jake Potts. So Jimenez is going to be wondering whether or not that lap could have come in qualifying, and maybe not in the race, but even still, you know, incredible lap from him on race pace to be that close to quali, and that put in a massive dent of 0.4 of a second into Jake Potts. So we may not look at the battle being super close, but who knows, near the end of this race we may end up finding a battle that is indeed down to the wire.
Yeah, that is only, as you mentioned, half a tenth slower than qualifying pole time. So maybe actually Jimenez is actually pushing and getting a bit squirrely, but it's actually being quicker for him. These cars seem to be very understeery from what I can gather. So I don't know if actually the Jimenez pushing the car like this to have the rear come out a bit more is actually doing the right thing for him to combat that understeer. Maybe it's actually working better for him to catch up to Jake Potts here.
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, we'll see a lot of different philosophies in car setup. And just as I say that, big slide from Jokum there. Very, very lucky to catch that one. And that's not going to do him any favors in trying to battle with the number 91 ahead of him for that locals team. But, yeah, Jokum getting a very, very, very wide slide and managing to save it, thankfully. But definitely heating up the tires and maybe having to take these next couple of corners a little bit easier than he would like to, but he's definitely going to be pushing back. Knows that he does have the pace to catch up to the car in front, and was sitting on the back of him for quite a while without really being able to make any sort of move. And it looks as though almost potentially maybe different arrows as well, as it looks like through the twistier stuff, the car in front, the number 91, can almost pull away, but then the number 33 of Jokum can really pull back closer in the faster sections. So a little bit of different philosophies as well when it comes to the car setup.
Yeah, for sure. I actually noticed that yesterday in my race. Some drivers were running different era setups, which, to be honest, I didn't expect because, you know, my philosophy was, maybe I'm giving away a bit too much information here, but I was running maximum downforce because I thought that was the only way possible. But some drivers were running less downforce, and, you know, given the only opportunity to pass is here on the main straight, that'll give you an advantage because you can, you know, not to get that gap behind you closed that quick. And there's actually some slow corners which don't require that much aero, and you rely more on mechanical grip. So you actually make up that time here in the middle and the third sector. So yeah, there's certainly some different philosophies here in terms of car setup. And actually, Jimenez is actually on a mission right now. 1 second gap to Potts. I don't know what happened to Potts, or if Jimenez was actually just holding back for a few laps there.
Yeah, it looks as though Potts may have had, I mean, his last lap was a 1:38 when he's been doing 1:37s pretty consistently up until then, so maybe had a little bit of an issue, and Jimenez is obviously going to now be able to see Potts right in front of him and be like, well, he's not that far, you know, he's not that far in front. If I can keep pushing like I am, and he's been doing very consistent 1:36s, so, you know, he's going to look to try and maybe make a move on Jake Potts and really force the issue, I think, and force Jake Potts into having to drive defensive. And what Jake thought was going to be a relatively easy race, you know, out in front, not having anyone to worry about, all of a sudden he's got Jimenez right up behind him, and that may surprise Jake a little bit, and maybe that's why Jake has made those mistakes, is realizing that Antonio was closed up so much.
Yeah, maybe Jake Potts' behavior will change here in when he's under pressure. Let's see how he reacts to that. But obviously, catching is one thing and passing is another, especially on a track like this. And we saw last year in F1 Hamilton trying to pass Alonso here. It's, if you know how to defend, obviously Alonso is a great defensive driver, but if you know how to defend, you know, you can keep that position. Let's see what Jimenez can do here against Potts.
Yeah, going down the start-finish straight, and again, another 8/10 taken out of him, so Jimenez is definitely really pushing for everything he's got, and almost looked like he was going to send it up the inside there of Jake Potts, but a little bit too far back to make anything yet, but definitely just showing himself in the mirrors and being like, hey man, I am here, you know, if you make another mistake, I'm going to be right all over you, and I'm going to be trying to make sure that I can get past as early as possible, and maybe even start running away. I mean, Antonio Jimenez is definitely showing that he has that pace advantage over the car number 41 of Jake Potts, and yeah, I mean, it looks as though Jimenez's car is definitely a little bit more slidey, and looking into the corners, you see the back end seems to step out a little bit in comparison to Jake Potts, who seems like the car does what it's wanting to do, but then sort of just plows through the mid part of the corner. But it looks as though Jimenez has got a setup that works really well for him, and is absolutely pushing through as a as you know, a benefit to have that more slidey rear end to really rotate that car into the corner. But we'll have to wait and see what that does for tire wear as well later on into the race.
Oh yeah, for sure, that's a big concern. But actually, if you notice on the entry, the car is very understeery. So, you know, some drivers have very different driving styles. Jake Potts prefers to have his car do exactly what he wants in every part of the corner. and Jimenez maybe wants a more understeery car so he can actually trust the car more not to spin around on entry and then spin the car on throttle on the exit and through the mid corner. I think that's his driving style.
Yeah, absolutely. But there has been a full round of pit stops here from quite a lot of these drivers, so this lap traffic now may play a factor in the battle as we see a car almost taking off the front of Jake Potts there. So that was an incredibly close call from him. And obviously it is lap 18 here of 35, so just I believe just over halfway, I believe if my maths is correct, or maybe just under halfway even. And it looks like most people are coming in for their pit stops now, but it looks like these two are going to battle right to the end. I'm pretty sure Jimenez is probably going to pit when Potts pits, and I wouldn't be surprised to see that not change, and Potts very much just trying to extend as long as he can and maybe see if Jimenez makes a mistake. But from the way Jimenez is driving so far, I don't think a mistake is going to happen.
Yeah, I'm not expecting a mistake here unless these drivers are not very good under pressure. I would expect Potts to make a mistake more easily than Jimenez from the history I know of these drivers. But actually coming to the strategy here, I think maybe Jimenez will want to stay out to make the overcut work, because then he'll be in clean air, hopefully, if those blue flags don't get in the way. So maybe that will be the strategy for him. Let's see what they do here on this lap.
Yeah, and it looks like both drivers staying out for now, but there is a lot of blue flag traffic. I mean, already up to 15th is going to be lapped, and these three cars all in front are all going to be battling for position as well. So it's looking like we're going to be getting quite a few battles rise up here, and it's going to look like Antonio's going to try and send it up the inside of Jake Potts, and it looks as though those two did manage to get away with that, and Jake Potts is going to try and look now back round to the inside again of turn number 2. If he can hold that round the inside, it's going to make the attacking job for Jimenez much harder. But Jimenez trying that double apex, getting on the throttle really late there, but getting a really good run out of the corner, and that may mean that he's going to have the drive to get past Jake Potts as well, as it looks like Jake almost went a little bit too wide there, and Jimenez staying very close to the inside of that corner, as it looks as though he's just going to try and maybe follow him through this next section. Obviously with so much backmarker traffic, yes, you maybe want to try and use them to your advantage, but also you need to be careful that these guys aren't holding you up and aren't causing any dangerous moves, as it looks like Frank Settle there getting lapped is going to get out of the way, and almost comes straight back across Antonio Jimenez and almost takes Jimenez's front wing off. So we've seen quite a few of these backmarkers almost taking out this battle for the lead, and I'm sure Antonio Jimenez is not going to be saying very nice things in that helmet of his.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't be very happy in Antonio Jimenez's positions there. He's just lost a second with that traffic. I think well, hindsight is 2020, but if I was Jimenez, I would just have pitted there to avoid all that traffic there. Jake Potts.
Yeah, Jake has just pit.
Yeah, so he did the right decision there to avoid all that traffic, even though he already got past some of them. But maybe he saw on his relative too much blue there, so he just decided, okay, I'm gonna pit now, and maybe Jimenez will lose a bit more time to me. And now he just needs to have maybe made the calculations. I don't know what the pit delta here is, but he maybe will get out in clean air to get some fast laps in.
Yeah, you're looking at about a 35-second pit lane time, so it looks as though you're going to lose about 20 seconds, maybe 25 over the course of the lap. Obviously, with that pit lane time, not counting for the fact that you will be stationary for some of that. Obviously, you'll be stationary for around about 7 to 8 seconds. It seems like is sort of the average pit stop for a lot of these drivers. So. Adding fuel, adding tires, as we see Jake Potts trying to warm up the tires a little bit there as well, doing a little bit of weaving, but seems to have come out in quite a bit of clean air, which is quite nice for him. So I'd imagine that was something that he'd planned, definitely, and we'll see whether or not Antonio Jimenez actually comes back and reacts on that, as it looks like the gap now down between himself and Jake Potts has increased to almost 24 seconds, so unless Antonio got held up a bit in traffic, we may see Antonio drop down to P5 and Jake Potts be promoted up into P4, but it looks as though Antonio is continuing on, so not responding to the call just yet, so I'd imagine he's going to try and go as long as possible and hope that Jake Potts gets held up by a couple of the other backmarkers that are ahead of him.
Yeah, I think the ideal time to pit for these drivers, both of them, was oh, never mind. I was confusing the names. I thought Potts went into the pits again. Never mind me.
No, Joe Watts came into the pits.
Yeah, as I was saying, the time to pit for these drivers seemed to be before they came up to those back markers there, for both of them actually, because now they've lost some times. Jimenez more than Potts there, behind the back markers there. So I don't know what Jimenez could do now. He's obviously still battling some back markers, so he's gonna be losing some time, if not much. But he seems to be now in clean air for a few laps ahead of him. So maybe he can make up that gap to Potts before he stops.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we'll see from the last laps, I mean, a 2:01 from Jake Potts obviously being on his pit lap, compared to a 1:36.91, I think we'll see a more representative time this time by from Jake Potts, obviously, and Antonio Jimenez. But again, another fastest lap of the race for Antonio Jimenez, so he's really pushing on and really trying to extend that gap as much as he can. And if Potts can't answer back with the same sort of pace, being on fresher rubber, then I think we may see this strategy actually work out in his favor, and end up causing himself to have quite a nice lead when he exits the pits. But obviously it's all speculation so far, and with a 25-second gap, I mean, you're thinking he may come out battling, but it's still, I think, too close to call for Antonio right now. So he's going to try and keep pushing and extend the gap, maybe to around about that 28-second gap, maybe even 30 seconds before he thinks about coming into the pits.
Yeah, it really is doing quite a few quick laps here, but he's coming up to another blue flag car, Vincent Saint there, and you know, it's just a lot of blue flags there. So, you know, there's only so much you can do here with these blue flags here. Obviously, mixing up, we're coming to the last third of the race, so the grid is all mixed up, and you're gonna find blue flags everywhere. So I don't even know if he has a race engineer to tell him when he should pit in order to not come out behind traffic. So maybe he's just guessing there with, I don't know if these drivers know the pit delta. So I'm actually surprised if Jimenez hits the right spot here with the back markers here correctly, because they're all over the place really. Obviously you're leading the race, you're racing guys that haven't stopped yet, you're racing blue flags who obviously don't want to lose too much time because they're doing their own race. You know, it's just too much to take into consideration as someone in the car at the moment. So some drivers actually, if they get a race engineer here, they actually have a massive advantage for these races.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that really we only see in the level of F1, I believe. You know, I know that I myself do a bit of race engineering for one of the teams, and it's one of those things that as a race engineer, it's a very difficult job. You have to be aware of a lot of different things, but also at the same time, you know, you can help your drivers with information that they otherwise normally wouldn't get by themselves. So, you know, there'd be a lot bigger gaps, and you may be able to tell them lap times that otherwise they may not be able to see from obviously the relatives and such, depending on where they're battling. So in a grid as big as this, definitely having a race engineer will help massively. And it looks as though the lap times for Jimenez and Potts is obviously the battle that we're going to be watching closely, as Larson and Redman also haven't pitted yet. So the only three drivers so far that haven't pitted are your top three, and once those pit, we'll see a bit more of a representative view on what the grid will look like going forward. As it looks like there's a couple of people coming in for even more pit stops. Frank Settle in for his third, and Stuart Gibbons in for his second. So maybe a couple of drivers having a bit more issues further down the grid, but yeah, as you said, you know, getting into the later parts of this race, you know, we're 23 laps in of a 35 lap race, and it looks like the grid seems to be probably as widespread as we've seen it all race so far, and that's really going to cause a bit of issues, I think, for a lot of these guys, is the fact that, you know, for the likes of Antonio Jimenez, as we will jump on board with him, as he seems like he's got quite a bit of clean air, actually, so maybe he's gotten through all the back markers for now, but even still, you know, he's probably aware that most of the people around him are going to be ones that, to be honest, have pit and aren't really on the same strategy as him, so yeah, I think he's going to be aware of that, and is just going to try and make sure that they can hopefully move as early as possible, as we will see Frederick Larson and Julie Redmond now both in for the pit. So final driver left to pit is Antonio Jimenez, so I'd imagine and expect him to come in maybe within the next couple of laps.
Yeah, Jimenez here really lucky with all the traffic here, really fortunate to be able to extend that gap to Potts there. So 28 seconds you said he would lose, so that's cleared, so maybe he will even push a few more laps and stop for like in 5 laps or so, if he can keep up that pace now, which it seems like he could, with the drivers spinning there in front of him doing a great job to stay out of the way. Yeah, seems like Jimenez really hit it with the pit stops here and the traffic.
Yeah, absolutely, but one battle that is brewing is Victor Barris, currently gained 16 positions. He is in the points so far, who is indeed Antonio Jimenez's teammate, and he's going to be battling with Jackson Carr and seeing whether or not he can maybe send one up the inside of that number 97. He's going to look for it, but think better of it, as Antonio Jimenez does indeed come in to the pits. So Jimenez does finally come in after 24 laps, and Victor Barris is going to try and maybe make it up the inside here of turn number 2, and definitely looked like he was going to do it, and maybe force Jackson to take a bit more of a defensive line than he would have liked, and as such that may mean he does get a worse run coming out of the corner, and we'll see whether or not he tries to go the long way around the outside, and nothing doing just yet. But that Arriga car is definitely putting up a very stern defense against a very, very quick driver in Victor Barris.
Yeah, really great job there by Jackson Carr, trying to defend against the championship leader by a big margin. Ooh. As he pushes him wide there. Ooh, what happened
it looked as though Victor tried to go the long way around the outside in the second part of the chicane, not even in the first part, but the second part of the chicane, and as such went off track. Let's see if we can get back on board with him. It looked like he was trying to go up the inside, and then, oh, unfortunately, there was just nowhere left for him to go, and that's why trying to pass in that chicane is very difficult, you know? There's not a lot of room. It's like trying to pass in any chicane, you know, the likes of Monza, the likes of Imola even as well. Chicanes are just not easy corners to overtake on.
Yeah, I think Victor Barris is just too quick for Jackson Carr there. He was expecting Jackson Carr to be slightly quicker there. The contact was, you know, on the rear end of Jackson Carr, because Victor was just carrying so much more speed through that chicane there. So obviously it's the fastest driver at the moment, Victor Barris, according to the championship standings. So obviously he's gonna carry much more speed through the corners, and I think that's actually what caused his crash earlier on with I think Emmanuel Gerbino there. Same thing on the last sector. He just ran into the back of the driver in front because he brakes so much later. He carries so much more speed through the corners. He's just not expecting the drivers to be that much slower than him. So he just understands the car better. Is able to push the car more through the corners, and you know that's how he is leading the championship right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And just off screen there, we did see Darius getting past Steve Bunting for 15th position, making almost quite light work of him, as he seems to have gotten past and then immediately extended that gap. So Darius looking to get back up the grid. You know, he was quite high up in terms of the gridding order, so to be down in 15th is not what he really wanted, as that gap as well between Antonio Jimenez and Jake Potts seems to have come down quite a bit now, and settled around about that 3-second gap. So as I mentioned when we said it was about 2-3 seconds, sorry, more like 28 second pit window, it looked like I was a little bit off, but enough to at least mean that Antonio Jimenez was out in very clean air and able to really just push for the next couple of laps, as he's managed to extend the gap and make the overcut work, which is something that we haven't quite seen a lot in this series. Overcuts, not really something we tend to see working out in favor of a lot of these drivers. Normally the earlier pit stop and then just getting out and just running your own race seems to be a bigger help.
Yeah, especially with the possibility of a safety car. Like at any point in the race, a safety car can come out, and if you've done your stop, you can just carry it to the end. And if your opponents haven't done their stop, you're then bunched up behind the safety car, and you can just take it easy because you know they're gonna lose over 20 seconds on their mandatory stop. So I mean, just pitting early is the safest strategy really, but obviously pitting late here for Jimenez definitely paid out for him as he tries to... Oh no, this is Victor Barres actually. I thought Jimenez was catching up to another blue flag here. I mean, he's eating up blue flags for breakfast here on this race. As you see Victor Barres here trying to make a pass on Jackson Carr for P9 there, as they're going to go side by side here into these last few corners, and Victor Barres seems to have made that pass work. It's been coming a long time, this pass here, as Jackson Carr doesn't seem to have that much pace as Victor Barres, but good for him to show what he can do and holding up the championship leader here. Maybe he can come back here into turn 1 with that slipstream. Let's see.
Yeah, absolutely, and it was quite looked like it was quite an easy move. You know, he managed to get the run out of the corner, and that was all she wrote really. But let's see what the pace difference is like between the two as we go into the corner, and it looks like the number 97 there is just not quite able to get onto the back end of Victor Barres, and we'll have to probably wait a few more laps if he wants to try and make any moves and still keep it nice and close. But we'll wait and see, as we will jump on board with Vincent Saint, as he's been battling with Arturo, the number 2 car, ahead of him, and seeing whether or not he can maybe make a move, as Arturo does go to the inside very defensively here going into turn number 1. It's something that we see quite a lot of these drivers, and maybe that's going to mean we're going to see Vincent go the long way around the outside, and nothing doing just yet, as the number 088 is going to now maybe look to get a really good run out of the corner, maybe look to the inside here, but no, he's just going to sit behind for now and just see whether or not that number 2 car makes a mistake. And they do indeed go very wide, which is going to allow him to go up the inside of the corner, and they almost touch again. That camera angle not doing us any favors and seeing just how close that was, but geez, these drivers are definitely keeping it very nip and tuck between each other, as that number 34 car ahead, that is Antonio Jimenez, the race leader, getting involved in that battle as well, it looked like for a moment there, as Vincent Saint and Arturo are now side by side going into the chicane. We've seen this before already. We've seen how difficult it is to make the pass, but Vincent does manage to do it quite nicely there, and no contact made between the two, so that's some amazing racing. And now Arturo is now going to be hunted down by Patrick Olsen, who I believe is Vincent Saint's teammate, so maybe Vincent Saint making the pass a little bit harder than he otherwise would have to potentially back up Arturo into his teammate and cause an even bigger issue, as Jake Potts there, our second place man, is behind this battle as well. So you know, while these guys are battling, blue flags are being waved, so we'll see whether or not they let him pass on the straight, and that's probably going to mean that gap between Antonio Jimenez and Jake Potts gets extended even further again this lap.
Yeah, man, this is really interesting for these blue flag cars, because they're battling for almost a points position, and they're having to let go of the leaders, and the leaders are just messing up this fight, man. It should be the other way around. The blue flags messing up the leaders. It's usually how it goes, but yeah, you know, they have to let Jake Potts by here, and you know, it's just nobody wants to give up their own race, you know, so they're just gonna have to hope that in good faith the other drivers pause the race for a little bit. Oh, and Jake Potts gets squeezed there for Patrick Olsen, making it really hard for Jake Potts to get around there. They really don't want to give up their race for letting the leaders by here. Now Jake Potts needs to close that gap in 6 laps, and I don't see that as just being possible here at this point.
Yeah, and in doing so and making it so difficult on himself, he has allowed Arturo to catch back up to the rear end of him, and also allowed Emmanuel to get onto the back of them as well. So that battle that was just between a couple of drivers has now extended between Vincent Saint, Patrick Olsen, Arturo, and Emmanuel, all within the same sort of stretch of track, as Patrick Olsen is going to try and maybe go up the inside of his teammate. I wonder if the teammates are going to let each other race, or whether or not they will let each other by. It looks as though it was just a let me through, I'm a bit quicker than you type move, but done in a very nice way where none of them seem to have lost out any pace at all. So maybe now Vincent Saint is going to be holding off Arturo in the background, and that's probably going to mean Emmanuel is also going to have a run on that number 2 car of Arturo. Arturo is going to be looking ahead and also looking behind, trying to keep eyes on the mirrors and also ahead, as he does try to look like he was going to go aggressive. And it looks as though, who was that? Emmanuel just absolutely sent it up the inside and caused a massive collision with Vincent Saint.
Will we have a safety car here? Because if we do, it's gonna shake up things a bit with Larson getting into the mix there for the win there. Doesn't seem like one is coming out, so good for Jimenez and Potts there, managing to keep their position. But a safety car here with 5 laps to go would really make things interesting for everyone, really having a shot at the win there.
Yeah, absolutely, and I want to see what that looked like on board with Emmanuel and just see what happened here. So going down the back straight, we will see whether or not he does go to the inside, and it looks like he did, and brakes incredibly late. I'm not even sure if he was going to make the corner there, and ends up having to collect himself with that number 088 car, and ends up just coming back to the pits and ends up getting himself towed back. So we may not see him back out for the rest of this race with only 5 laps to go.
Yeah, I don't think so. He just got distracted with the car in front, who was trying to cover up the inside, and he just had no reference points at that stage of the corner, because the car on his left was covering off the brake markers. And so he just totally missed his braking point with having to go that deep into the inside of turn 1. And obviously, you know, it's quick decisions that you have to make here for braking and you know, making every corner. It's especially racing with other drivers, you don't get to practice that much besides outside of the race. So you know, that's just what happened to him. That's why it's so important to have multiple braking points and references for the corner. As you see, Victor Barris here trying to make another position on Floman this time for P8 there. Really great race by Victor Barris here, coming from P26 after having missed that qualifying session. You know, 26 to P8 eventually. But even P9 is just very good for him, as you know, they're side by side here out of the last corner. So Victor Barris, I'm just hoping he's gonna stick it up the inside into turn 1 here and make another easy pass. As we see someone coming off from the pits, so let's see if they will interfere with that race, as Victor Barris just brakes very late here, trying to make the move, and I think he made it stick there. I don't think, Flodman is not coming back from there. I think, you know, Victor Barris just made up another position and he's gonna stick up with that. He's got 3 seconds to the next car in front with 4 laps to go. I think it's gonna be hard for him to gain any more positions, but I think he's gonna keep this one, this P8.
Yeah, absolutely, and as you say, I was a little bit concerned that maybe the car coming out of the pit lane could have affected things. Obviously, that 88, who I believe was Vincent Saint, so coming out of the pits after that crash that we saw earlier, and already seems to be affected quite heavily by what was caused with Emmanuel. But regardless, Victor Barris is now going to be... well, he's just going to be pushing on, you know, as we mentioned. Yeah, it's quite a big gap, you know, 3 seconds is still quite a long time, but, you know, we know his pace is good, and while he's been fighting, he hasn't particularly shown what he can do, so I think now is the time where he can really get his head down and really start to push and try and eke everything out of the car, and really try to throw pressure onto the number 91, and then after that, if he catches the number 91, I don't think he's going to be gaining any more positions after that.
Yeah, I don't think so. And something interesting here, If it finishes like this and Jimenez has the fastest lap, which I think he does, they're now tied for the lead of the championship. Jimenez and Victor Barris, the teammates, with 85 points there. So, you know, Jimenez really taking a really big hit here with missing that qualifying and letting his teammates catch up to him. And obviously there's another point for safest driver, which I don't know who has it right now. But yeah, indeed it's Tony Jimenez who has the fastest lap. So, you know, they're tied, or Jimenez is 1 point ahead or 1 point behind Barris there. So, you know, missing a qualifying sometimes or having a very bad qualifying session, especially on a track like this, can really hurt your standings in the championship.
Yeah, absolutely. But I don't think the teammates are going to be too worried about who's leading the championship until like the very last rounds, right? I think as long as those two are up at the top, 1 and 2, I think they're not going to necessarily worry about the order for now. But definitely as it gets later on into the season, we'll see potentially Victor Barris and Antonio Jimenez gloves off and fighting each other a bit more, as it does look like Victor Barris has now actually caught up onto the back of that number 91 car, who seems to be going incredibly slow in comparison to what Victor Barris is able to do. So Victor was definitely looking up to maybe just make a move as early as possible, definitely trying to make his way up the inside, and he's coming back into the pit lane. Is that potentially for fuel?
It could be for fuel, or maybe a lot of more incidents and it just got a drive-through penalty. Let's see. It seems to be coming into the box, so maybe for fuel. Let's see.
That's going to be a big hit then to him in the championship. I mean, it was a very fast stop of only 4 seconds, so yeah, I'd imagine that would be just fuel and just topping up a little bit just to make to the end of the race. I mean, only 2 laps left. You would have thought maybe he would have calculated fuel a little bit better and saved a bit, but these fuel tanks obviously are restricted quite a lot. So depending on how they planned that out, that seems to be quite a massive hit. And now he's going to have to try and overtake Joachim all over again. For P8, so that's not done him any favors.
Yeah, that's not very good from Barris, but it seems like he only lost 1 position, so it's not the end of the world for him. It's 2 points. But you know, I don't know what happened there really, because even with the safety car 4 or 5 laps where he must have saved some fuel, you'd expect him to make it to the end and everyone to make it to the end very easily. So I don't know what happened there. Maybe just big miscalculation. It doesn't seem to have happened with his teammates, and you'd expect them to share information. So I don't know what happened there really. Maybe we can ask him or his teammate at the end of the race in the interview.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think going forward, it's going to be one of those things that you know, obviously he's not going to want to be in a position like that again, so maybe just takes a bit more care in trying to get past all these drivers and not use as much fuel. But a battle that has developed over the last couple of laps has indeed been Frederick Larson and Joe Watts. Joe Watts putting in a couple of really good laps, and Frederick Larson seeming to have the pace drop off quite drastically, and that's now put Joe Watts right onto the back of Frederick Larson as Joachim Flubman also comes in for another pit stop. So I wonder if whether or not all these drivers that stopped earlier are going to have to come back in for another splash and dash right at the end of the race.
Yeah, it seems like Joachim Flubman ran wide on the last few corners and let Barris by. It seems like something's scraping on his car. I don't know if he has damage, but I'm on board and it seems like some noise on his car. I don't know where he picked that up. Yeah, he's got massive understeer coming into the pits. Maybe a puncture? Maybe they stopped so early the tires were they had a puncture.
I mean, potentially, but 1 more lap to go. And what that's going to mean here is Joe Watts and Frederick Larson are going to battle it out all the way to the line, and we'll keep on board with this battle because I'm sure it's going to be a very, very close one as Joe Watts tries to maybe get just as close as he can to Frederick Larson and keep as close as he can. Obviously, knowing it's quite hard to overtake, he's going to have to get right onto the back. He's going to have to get right in that gearbox and make sure that he can find any space to overtake. Obviously, going to be very difficult around this Hungarian Hungaroring circuit as we have seen so far. You know, all the drivers we'd expect to be making up a lot of positions kind of struggling a bit to really make those moves, but it looks like Joe Watts has found some pace here from somewhere, and he's really putting it onto the back of Frederick Larson. And if Frederick Larson doesn't hold this off, and as it looks like there's to be a car off on the chicane there, and I think just got out of the way of the track, but it looks like Frederick had to cut the chicane to avoid him, and that may mean that he had a slowdown as well. And just as he has that slowdown, he slows down in the middle of the corner, and Joe Watts has spun. That's going to be absolutely massive for this battle, and that's going to allow Julie Redmond to maybe come past as well. And Julie Redmond's now going to get involved on this battle and maybe pick up a position that she otherwise wouldn't have, as Jimenez does indeed set the fastest lap of the race, 1:36.6. And on the last couple of corners in the final lap, there is drama absolutely everywhere, and that number 57 is going to be looking at Joe Watts and trying to maybe make a move up the inside of the hairpin, but nothing doing just yet. There's only one more corner to go. If Julie Redmond wants this fourth position, she's got to do it right here, right now, and Frederick Larson has pulled into the pit lane, and so has Joe Watts as well. Joe Watts and Frederick Larson both into the pit lane, and it looks like Larson does indeed get that third position, but Julie Redmond comes home in fourth.
That's a crazy finish. They're finishing in the pit lane because they have to serve a penalty for incidents maybe. And this is Schumacher at Silverstone a few years ago, where he won the race serving a penalty on the same lap. Maybe the same thing happened here because, you know, with the contact, you know, 36 laps of racing around Hungary where it's easy to pick up off tracks, these drivers are close to the limit of 16 incident points for this league. So with that contact and the off track for Larson, both of these drivers picked up at least 4x for each one of them. So both of them had to serve a penalty. I don't know how the standings are gonna be at the end when everything is done, but they crossed the line before having to stop on their marks for the penalty. So that's a very unusual incident to happen. I've never had this happen before. I don't know what's gonna happen with the standings there.
Well, we will wait and see. I believe that is indeed the final car over the line. So we'll wait and see if anything changes in the official results, or I should say unofficial results, because they may get amended. But it looks as though, if I quickly show the results page, it looks as though actually everything seems pretty good. And indeed, no, actually, Frederick Larson did drop. Julie Redmond did take third.
Yeah, so basically it means they finished the race without serving the penalty, which they picked up on the last lap. So there was no way for them to serve the penalty before crossing the line, because it's a very early line on this track. It's right after the last corner. So yeah, there was no way for them to serve that penalty after they made contact and got the penalty. So yeah, unfortunate for them. Frederick Larson missing out on that last podium place. Maybe Joe Watts as well, because, you know, Larson went wide in the chicane, so he had to slow down, and Watts was gonna take that third place. And because of that contact, Julie Redmond just made the most out of it and took the last position herself.
Yeah, I mean, this is very unofficial results. Obviously, we'll wait and see what the admins make of it and whether or not they make any changes. But as it stands, it does look like your race results are as follows. Antonio Jimenez with a very, very good drive and making the overcut work for him against Jake Potts to take that lead of the race, considering the fact that he didn't really lead that many laps until Jake Potts ended up pitting. And then, obviously, Jake Potts finishing in second because of it. What that will mean is Julie Redmond does indeed take third place from James Miller in fourth. Frederick Larson and Joe Watts fifth and sixth, both coming into the pit lane on the final lap to serve penalties and not being able to do so before the line there, with then the number 91 car there finishing in seventh with Victor Barris in eighth, and Patrick Olsen in ninth, and Joachim Flubman rounding out the top 10. And once again, absolutely mental race.
Yeah, it seems to all kick off in the last few laps there. And, you know, every race, there's an unprecedented event. Like, I know at Imola in the F3, we had an overtake in the pit lanes, like in the pit stops. Someone stopped, it was in front, had a slightly slower stop, and there was a race out of the pits and an overtake on the pits. And that's also very unusual to happen here. So it just seems to get more and more interesting every race there is.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's bring in Jake Potts here for an interview as well. See what he thought of the race and whether or not he had any sort of comments about what happened, obviously with the pit stops and maybe a couple of blue flag traffics that didn't help him out. But let's bring him in. Hey Jake, finishing second for yourself today, leading the race for the majority of it though, so probably not the result you wanted, but how did you feel the race went for yourself?
Well, it's my first podium since season 1, so I'm pretty thrilled with that. Definitely really wanted that P1, but Antonio just had too much pace for me. I was not able to keep up with him at all.
Yeah, absolutely, and it looked as though Antonio's pace, I mean, it was impressive to see that he was doing those 36s lap after lap. I mean, you set a 36 in qualifying, and it looked as though you were going to be one of the only ones to do it. And then in the race, it seemed Antonio found some pace from somewhere and managed to make the overcut work, which was quite surprising to us. I'm not sure if you had maybe a pit strategy in mind and whether or not the overcut looked good to you as well. But yeah, it seemed like it worked out.
I didn't really have a great strategy there. If I could have gone longer, I would have, but I didn't put enough fuel in. And yeah, he just had the insane pace. I was hoping there was another lap car in front of us that maybe it'd slow him down a little bit. And then my exit from the pits was that first lap. That outlap was awful. I lost a couple seconds there. So
Okay.
I just got to work on that.
Yeah, absolutely. But hey, as you say, you brought yourself back to a podium, so that's amazing to see. And it looks as though there's probably a little bit of there's going to be a little bit of issues regarding the actual race results, as we're still trying to work out who it is actually finished third, as Frederick Larson and Joe Watts had penalties coming into the pits and may have promoted Julie Redman up into third. I mean, our timings are saying that that's what happened, but we'll have to wait and see for the official results. But I'm not sure if you have any sort of insight as to what went on there.
No, I think I heard that there might have been some contact or something from somebody having a slowdown, but I haven't watched the replay, so I'm not sure. But yeah, it looks like Julie Redman in third and my teammate James in fourth, so we got a nice haul of points, so I'm excited about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And regarding the teams championship, obviously you and Kuda tend to have the typical team rivalry, and to bag quite a few points over them must feel good.
Absolutely. I'm not sure where they were. What's his name finished? Julie's teammate Brandon Walker. Oh, he didn't finish. Yikes! Yeah, so that's pretty good for us. So I'm definitely excited for the team points there.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, amazing result to get yourself in second place. Unfortunately, couldn't have been the win, but hey, podium's still great. So hopefully we'll see you back again next week.
Absolutely. Go Lumos.
See you later, mate. Yeah, so we've heard from Jake Potts, and it doesn't look like anyone else is going to be joining us for the interviews, but yeah, I mean, once again, Carlos, thank you for joining me, and this F3 round again doesn't disappoint.
Definitely not. I cannot predict what's gonna happen next week at the Circuit of the Americas. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Circuit of the Americas, a lot of drivers look at, and not their favorite circuit, I think is fair to say, but may provide some pretty good racing. I mean, it has seemingly quite a lot of different styles of corner and all built into one circuit. It may end up, as a driver point of view, may not feel super flowing, but as a commentator's point of view, obviously we get to see so much from that track that action's probably going to be everywhere. But yeah, again, thank you, Carlos, for joining me, and that'll do it for us here from the iFormula League. If you want to get involved in the action, as always, hit us up on the website there, the https www.iformulaleague.com. Although, saying that, I believe we will be getting Julie Redman in for an interview for that third place. Bit of an interesting one, so we'll see what she makes of it. But let's see if we can move her in here. Hey Julie, third place for yourself as far as we're aware. Obviously there's a little bit of controversy as to what potentially happened there. and with Frederick Larson and Joe Watts, we believe, both having penalties at the end. So how's that race for yourself? It seems like there's a little bit of a mic issue, so we will we'll wait for that one to come back in for now. But yeah, I mean, as we mentioned, Circuit of the Americas up next, so yeah, going to be an interesting one, and one I'm pretty sure that these drivers are going to try and again look for a bit more results and really push themselves into a great position going forward in the championship. Obviously, quite a few positions are going to change around, I think, regarding the championship standings. So we'll see how that plays out later on.
Yeah, for sure. There's now a big fight at the front between teammates, which, yeah, obviously you said they're not going to be too worried about the standings right now. But I would be, because, you know, both of these guys are massively fast, and Victor Barris certainly knows Jimenez, has known Jimenez for a long time. So he knows he's also fast and able to keep up with him. So if they're not planning on having any team orders, I would be worried as Victor Barris. So now he needs to, all the good work he has done to put up over a 20 points gap has now been undone, and he needs to do it all over again. So hopefully he'll pay more attention to the clock next time, with all this daylight savings thing going on, because it changes again next week for Spain, for Europe.
Yep.
So hopefully he doesn't miss it, and he can actually make the qualifying this time.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, that'll do it from us here. And again, hopefully everyone enjoyed, and we'll see you all next week for the Circuit of the Americas for round number 6 here in the iFormula League.